All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We got a good one for you as usual, and I do apologize if you get annoyed a little bit by us taking these breaks, but as you can say, if you don't like them, just skip ahead 4 minutes if you're not listening to us live. We encourage you to do that because for our live listeners, it helps us to kind of put together a better show just by resetting over those time periods and just kind of getting mentally prepared, getting water, whatever the deal is. It does help us in quite a major way. So now we turn our attention to 2010. And as we know, in a rage, grassroots conservatives launched an insurgency against the Republican establishment. The Tea Party movement ran a series of primary challenges accusing Republicans of being insufficiently oppositional to President Obama. Their insurgency, as reported here by Splinter News, was widely successful. In 4 years, they had picked off a sitting senator and the majority leader of the House, making it possible for Republican politicians to break with their base for fear of losing a primary. The establishment lost control, and an ideological movement now controlled the direction of the party. The grassroots outrage here in highlighting this next key point, underwritten by big donors, unchecked by any moderating party apparatus, set the stage for Trump's unvarnished racism and assault on the rule of law. In 2018, Democrats are confronting the stupefying threats of the Trump administration. The Democratic Party establishment is bracing for a similar reckoning of its own grassroots. The resistance has pushed Democrats towards much sterner opposition to Trump, and the organized left is larger at any point since the Great Depression. The voters of the Democratic Party are more dissatisfied with corporate lawyers and former prosecutors who make up the party's leadership now more than any point in the past 2 decades. And the unfortunate thing is, here's the main difference between the Tea Party of the left and the Tea Party of the right. The Tea Party of the right had some major dollars behind it. These people are all grassroots. They are pretty much coming in, they're coming in with not a lot here. They're coming in with almost nothing, and they are fighting for what they believe in. They're raising money. They're getting the momentum of the people behind them, and this is not some there's no George Soros funding this. Like, people are getting funded by Our Revolution, which people want to tell you now is bankrupt. Surprisingly, we have this guy right now on Politico who's literally written for 3 straight days. He thinks he's like Jesus. If you go into Politico at any time for the past 3 days and look to the top page, I'm going to do this right now. I'm going to go to Politico.com, look at the top page. We will see. And I guarantee you want to find something anti-Bernie Sanders or anti-Our Revolution, which is the affiliated group of Bernie Sanders. And yeah, here it is. Our Revolution keeps consultant who made anti-immigrant comments, and I checked. It was from 2015 on a Fox News panel, and they severely limited her role or whatever. But she's still on the payroll, pretty much. So they keep consultants, and who apparently, she apologized. But she also called into question the motivation of the people who spoke out with their association of Our Revolution. Hey, think this is no bleep. Edward Isaac Dovier. You click on him. She's a chief Washington correspondent for Politico. This is a big time guy. And if you look at his past stories written, they're almost all 3 major reports about how bad Our Revolution is and how bad Bernie Sanders is, and the fact that he's running for Vermont in a way that the establishment of the party does not like. It's incredible. So he is literally he's one of the worst. So he calls himself a journalist, but that's really not what it is. I did have to. These are the people who write Political Playbook. Ugh. Politico's a disgusting organization. Anyway, so in 2018, Democrats are confronting those threats, but a Tea Party of the left has been much slower to materialize than the conservative uprising of the right. As the primary season ramps up, the left's record has been decidedly mixed. 2 weeks ago, the pundits were quick to declare the establishment firmly in control of the Democratic Party. Progressive challenger Paula Jean Swearengin was crushed by conservative Democratic Senator Joe Manchin in West Virginia. Former Representative Dennis Kucinich, whose long-shot 2004 presidential campaign prefigured in certain ways the agenda of today's Democratic insurgent, lost badly to a chief of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, former Chief Richard Cordray, in the race for the Democratic nomination for governor of Ohio. According to the Washington Post, the Democratic establishment is alive and well, thriving after big wins, and the party's left fell short as better-funded candidates easily won their primary. So, one of the main problems I think with this is the fact that, again, there are much better funded candidates, and in the situation with Richard Cordray, a lot of progressives were pretty happy with him anyway. I mean, I did a story about the two matchup in the show, and it was pretty much the perfect situation anyone can ask for the Democratic nomination. I really would have been happier with any or either of them. I just wouldn't have cared really. And so that's pretty much the main thing. I would have been happy with either of them. And the last Tuesday, though, the media narrative last Tuesday turned again. Funny how that happens. The media can easily be manipulated. But the thing is, if they try, they will try. They will try as hard as they can. You're seeing it with Politico. You're seeing it with some of the bolder outlets out there. They will try as hard as they possibly can to shift the narrative, to push and push and push, because they're in Washington and they get fed all these tips by Democratic people saying, "Oh, this is so great, this is so great," and there's a much stronger resistance effort, by the way, to these type of candidates, these far left Bernie Sanders type candidates in Washington than there ever was to any Tea Party person. Like, there was such strong resistance to those people, to all those people. And, it's pretty crazy. So, I mean, there's a much stronger Democratic Party establishment. There's a much stronger media resistance to these new left candidates, new wave Democratic candidates. And so that makes it a lot harder for them as well. So, anyway, so the media narrative turned again last Tuesday as the Washington Post declared the left is winning the Democratic Civil War. Kara Eastman, who's a liberal social worker, built her campaign around Medicare for All, scored a shocking upset in the Nebraska House primary against a former congressman backed by the party establishment. Socialist candidates won 4 primaries in the state legislature in Pennsylvania, taking down 2 conservative incumbents in the process. Progressives also scored victories in congressional races, congressional primaries around the lieutenant governor's race in Pennsylvania and the Idaho governor's race. So the establishment is in control, or is the left winning the Civil War? The truth is the establishment is still in control of the party, but their grip on power is weaker than it's ever been. They're still in power, but they do not convince. There's an ideological movement afoot in the Democratic Party that's winning converts in the base, but it doesn't have the political power to consistently win primaries and take control of the party. So, I mean, gotta be honest here, that is probably a pretty accurate statement. If I had to agree, like it's a statement that, I mean, you hear a lot of times these progressive commentators, they're actually out there running grassroots campaigns and organizations. For example, Justice Democrats, Our Revolution. It's a great funding mechanism to be a part of, and sometimes people have outraised their opponents in situations like these, just with small dollar funding, and that's really the incredible thing, which is really cool. So anyway, we are getting to that point. So the truth is, the establishment it's failing, but there is a possibility where we, the Democratic voters, can possibly seize some power here in this next election. So the Democratic voters, especially millennials, who are increasingly important, an increasingly important part of the base, are overwhelmingly looking for a new direction. The market-based, means-tested, Wall Street-funded neoliberal approach the Democrats have proffered from Reagan-era from the Reagan era through the Obama era is no longer enough for the base of the Democratic Party. Democratic voters across the country have overwhelmingly supported an agenda calling for government guarantees of basic economic rights. A job, housing, healthcare, education, and decent income for all. So Democratic voters, they have overwhelming support for all of these issues. So future of the party, a policy report commissioned by Justice Democrats, as we know. Sean McElway led this. It's at a crossroads in the 2018 election. And some of the key findings of this report were the Democratic primary voters want aggressive action. More than 90% of Democratic primary voters support a tax on millionaires, an increased regulation on the banks. Sound familiar? I think I gave you a pretty big hint by the tone of voice I'm talking in. 86% of Democratic primary voters support a government guarantee on health care. 80% support government taking action to reduce inequality. And that's very strong numbers across the country as well, because people really do want to see action taken against inequality. It's one of the big issues, one of the big pressing issues that a lot of people are talking about. People are very interested, very, very interested in hearing some of this and really getting to the bottom of what we're doing here. So Democratic primary voters increasingly are rejecting racism. They support a path to citizenship, and nearly 1 in 5 believe that it should not involve any penalties. For the first time, it's been polled, a majority of white Democrats are likely to blame discrimination than more likely to blame discrimination than willpower, quote unquote, for racial inequality. Non-voters prefer Clinton to Trump, which by the margin of 53 to 44. Full turnout would have led to a Democratic presidential victory in 2014. Non-voters and marginal voters are more supportive of progressive politics. 68% of non-voters support increased regulation of big banks compared to 52% of consistent voters. So, I mean, if we get the non-voters out there, if we really excite turnout, get it jumping, get it popping, like Bernie Sanders did in the primaries. He got a lot of turnout, and Trump did as well. It can be a very big deal. The general public supports key over-the-horizon Democratic priorities like marijuana legalization and ending mandatory minimums to a $15 minimum wage and a single-payer healthcare system. Medicare for all and a $15 minimum wage are popular in purple states across the country. Democrats are not representing progressivism for their constituents as well. They are